Friends, I have a meeting in less than an hour and a half. You think I'm going to make it? Oh, guess I hope so. Well, some people might be upset with me if I didn't make it. Alright, well, I guess we'll have to make it. Friends, welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Memhei, Daf 45 of Masechet Ksubis. Friends, sort of, yeah. Today we talk about, like Nara Me'orasa, and Motzi Shemra, Nara Me'orasa, that kind of stuff. I think you gotta go slowly, basically. Let's go weiter. We're going to start in Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Tani Sheila. Sheila taught. Remember, my nephew's girlfriend's name is Shili. Shalosh Midos Benaira. Now, there are three halachis when it comes to Naira Me'orasa. Okay? What's a Naira Me'orasa? It literally just means a Naira. She's between 12 and 12 and a half. Ha-Me'orasa, that she's engaged. An engaged 12 and a half year old girl, well, between 12 and 12 and a half. At that age, I guess, there's still a big difference between 12 and 12 and a half. Meaning, they take it seriously at that age. At my age, 34 and 34 and a half, I recently turned 34 and a half, I guess. I guess I'm 34 and a half. Let's go weiter. So, 34 and a half. I think. And then this Naira Me'orasa is Mizana. And that's where things get interesting. So now, Ba'ula Eidim Beveis Chamia. So, if she's in her father-in-law's house, i.e. she's already married. Okay? So, witnesses come when she's already married and say that she was Mizana when she was a Naira Me'orasa. When she was betrothed. Now she's married. Shezinsa Beveis Avia, that she was Mizana right prior to being married, when she was still in her father's house, when she was a Naira Me'orasa. So Klinosa Pesach Beis Avia, so we stone her by the entrance to her father's house. Klomar Ugidulim Shagidaltem, go and see what you raised. Okay. So Naira Me'orasa is Mizana, then she gets married, and then witnesses come and say that she was Mizana. So it's basically the situation of Motzi Shemra. Well, Motzi Shemra means that it's a lie, but if it wasn't a lie, so then, right, this is what would happen, right? They stone her by the entrance to her father's house. Now, if witnesses come prior to the marriage, right, so she's a Naira Me'orasa, witnesses come while she's still a Naira Me'orasa and testify that she was Mizaneh and she has not yet been married. So then, Soklin Osa Pesach Shara Ir. So the halacha is that we stone her, but then it is by the entrance to the city. So in that respect, the difference between if she's married versus she's still betrothed is that if she's married, she'll be stoned by the entrance to her father's house, and if she is still betrothed, she'll be stoned by the entrance of the city. Sarcho levasov bagra. Now, if she was a Naira Me'orasa and she was Mizaneh, but then, now she's already a bogeres. Now she's no longer a Naira. Tidon bechenek. So then, the punishment is not stoning, it is strangulation. Because, I'm not going to get into the because so much, but I will just point out that the punishment for an Eishes Ish who's Mizaneh is Chenek, right? So meaning there's a Chiddush when it comes to Naira Me'orasa that it's Skila. But otherwise, outside of context of a Naira Me'orasa, a woman who has an extramarital relationship, I believe, whether it's from the Erisin, whether it's from the Nisuin, the punishment is Chenek. So what we're saying is that now, when she's a Bogeres, she's no longer a Naira Me'orasa, she's a Bogeres now, so then the punishment is no longer Skila, it's going to be Chenek. Now, fact the Gemara, the Meimra, the Cholhecha, the Ishtini Guf, Ishtini Ktala. So, fact the Gemara, 1 second. So, is this to say that when her body changes, so her punishment changes, meaning When she was a Naira Amorosa, so the punishment was Skila. Now that she's no longer a Naira, now she's a Bogeres, so we change the punishment. It's no longer Skila, it's now Chenek. Perfecti Gemar. Viramini, but we have a kasha. Naira Amorosa, okay. Shezinsa, she was Mizana as a Naira Amorosa. Umishe Bagra, Hotzi Alea Shemra. And now as a Bogeres, you have a situation of Motzi Shemra. Motzi Shemra is that after they're married, he comes and says she's not a Besula, she was Mizana during Erisin, she needs to get stoned. It turns out he's lying, so we give him Malchus and we fine him 100 selah. So in the event, so we have a Bryce now that's saying that she was engaged as a Naira, she was a Naira Morasa, she was Mizana as a Naira Morasa. She then gets married. When she's married, she's a Bogeres. Right? She's now a Bogeres and she gets married. And then her husband comes the next day and says that something is not right here. She was Mizana during Erisin. So, so in this case, because she's a Bogeres now, she does not, if it turns out that he's lying, right, he says that she's not a Besula, she was Mizana after Erisin. If it turns out that he's lying, so by Motzi Shemra, if he's lying, we whip him and we make him pay 100 selah, but now that she's a Bogeres, he does not, right, Eino Loka, he doesn't get whipped. Ve'eno nosameh selah, he doesn't pay 100 selahs. But she and her Edim Zomamin go to get stoned. What do you mean, he and her Edim Zomamin? Meaning, if the witnesses are telling the truth, then she's the one who's going to get stoned. And if they're liars, if they're Edim Zomamin, then they're the ones who are going to get stoned. So, Ella, he owes either she or the false witnesses will get stoned. Meaning, if the witnesses are telling the truth, she gets stoned. If the witnesses are not telling the truth, then they get stoned. Now, what do we see? So we see that even though she's a Bogeres, and he's coming and he's saying that she was Mizana Acher Erisin, so, okay, if he's lying, so then he doesn't get whipped, he doesn't pay, whatever, but if he's telling the truth, she gets Skila. Oh, friends, what do we do? Can anybody help me out? Can I make a phone call? Can I call somebody? Can somebody tell me what to do over here? On the one hand, we have a Bryce that's saying that if she becomes a Bogeres, then even though she was Mizana during Erisin, if she's now a Bogeres, the punishment is Chenek. But then we have a Bryce that says that if she was Mizana during Erisin, and now she gets married as a Bogeres, and then the husband says that she's not, that she was Mizana Acher Erisin, if he's telling the truth, she gets Skila. Friends, does she get Chenek or does she get Skila? Which one is it? Oh, that's the kasha. Okay. Omar Rav, says Rav, Motzi Shemra ko Omart, Shayni Motzi Shemra de Chidishu, do nichnes al chuba v'lo nivala ba'amo v'zinsa bechenek v'il Motzi Shemra beskila. La 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 la. Okay, so Rav says 1 second. Apples and oranges. We have one brisa that's saying that if she was mizana during Erisin, she was mizana as a Naira Morasa, and now she's a Bogeres, the punishment is Chenek. We have another brisa that says she was mizana as a Naira Morasa. She then gets married as a Bogeres. And then witnesses come and say that she was mizana as a Naira Morasa, she gets Skila. So one brisa says Chenek, the other brisa says Skila. Says Rava, apples and oranges brisas. You have an apple brisa and an orange brisa. Because the second brisa that says that she gets Skila is talking about Motzi Shemra. Right? What does it say in the brisa? Naira Morasa shezinso mishabraga hotzi alea Shemra. It's talking about a situation of Shemra. It's talking about a situation where she got married. Whereas the first situation is talking about where she didn't get married. Meaning, in the first situation, she was mizana as a Naira Morasa, which would be Skila. She still didn't get married yet. Now she's a Bogeres. and they're saying that she was mizana as a Nara Morasa, now she's a Bogeres, but she's still not married, so it's not Motzi Shemra. Motzi Shemra is after she gets married. She's not married yet, so it's not Motzi Shemra. And we're saying that now that she's a Bogeres, the punishment is no longer skila, it's chenek. However, we're saying that if she got married as a Bogeres, and now witnesses are coming and saying that she was mizana acher erisin, so then it's a situation of motzi shemra, right? Meaning the husband saying she was not a basula, she was mizana acher erisin, there are witnesses, whatever it is. So this is motzi shemra, and the punishment is skila, not chenek. And says Rava, it's apples and oranges, because since the second brisa is talking about motzi shemra and the first brisa is not, but the second brisa is talking about motzi shemra, it's not surprising that even though she's a bogeres, her punishment is still skila. How come it's not surprising? So says Rava, well, because the whole concept of motzi shemra is a chiddush in that if you have a naira ha'me'orasa and she was mizane while she's a naira ha'me'orasa, she now gets married, and she's still a naira me'orasa. And she's still a naira me'orasa. She gets married and she's still a naira. She gets married and she's still a naira. So again, she was a naira me'orasa. She was mizane. She now gets married. And we say, even nichnasa l'chuppah v'lo nivala, meaning she goes onto the chuppah. She didn't even have bia yet with her husband. So the only difference is that she was engaged, now she's married. Now as a married woman, if she's mizana as a married woman, as an eshes ish, what's the punishment? As I mentioned earlier, chenek. So if she gets, right, so she had a status change, something changed in her, right? Normally, right, as a nara morasa, the punishment is skila. As an eshes ish who's mizana, the punishment is chenek. And yet, we say that if he comes to Bezin the next day and says, look, I was with her last night, she is a, she was mizana acher erisin, even though she is now a married woman who the punishment would normally be chenek, still, in a classic case of motzi shemra, the punishment is skila. So even though she went through a change, she was engaged, now she's married. As an nar morasa, the punishment is skila. As an eshes ish, the punishment is chenek. Even though she went through this change, still, if the husband the next day comes and says, I married this girl, but it's clear that she was mizana acher erisin, what's the punishment? Not chenek, the current punishment of eshes ish, but skila, the punishment that would be as a nara ha'me'orasa. And therefore, it's not surprising also to say that if she got married and now she's a bogeres, i.e., she was a nara and now she's a bogeres, as a nara, she would be, the punishment would be skila, but as a bogeres, the punishment would be chenek. Still, it's not surprising that in the situation of motzi shemra, when it comes and says that she was mizana acher erisin, even though she was a nara and now she's a bogeres, it doesn't make a difference. Still, the punishment would be skila. Because by definition, when it comes to motzi shemra, even when there's a status change, right? She simply went under the chuppah, which now would be, right, in general, a punishment of chenek if she's mizana now. Still, we say nonetheless, the punishment is the original punishment of skila. So also, when she was a naira and now she's a bogeres, still the punishment is going to be skila. So it says Rava, it's inherent in motzi shemra that there's a chiddush involved here, and therefore I can understand why the Bryce is saying that by motzi shemra, even though she's now a bogeres, the punishment is still going to be skila. However, in the original brisa, where she didn't yet get married, so it's not a case of motzi shemra, it's simply a case of nara morasa, but at this point she's now a bogeres, it's not surprising that it's going to be a punishment of chenek since she's now a bogeres, because we're not talking about naira morasa, we're not talking about motzi shemra, we're talking about a regular case of naira morasa, and that's why that now she's a bogeres, the punishment is going to be chenek in that case. So let's read that again. On my Rava says Rava Motzi Shemra Ka'amar. The second brisa where we say that the punishment, that now that she's a bogeres, the punishment remains skila. That's by a case of Motzi Shemra once she's already married. Shiny Motzi Shemra. Motzi Shemra is unique. Dichirishu. Because it itself is a chiddush. That in general, if you have a naira and she gets engaged and then she gets married, simply going onto the chuppah and getting married, even if she didn't even sleep with her husband yet, she just simply went onto the chuppah. She's now a married woman. Vizinsa, and now she's mizaneh, all of a sudden bechenek. Ve'ilu motzi shemra beskila. And yet, if the next day the husband comes to Bezdin and says, look, she was mizana acher erisin, even though if she would be mizana now it would be chenek, but we say that her punishment is skila. And therefore it's not surprising that also in this case that she was a naira, but now she's a bogeres. If he comes to Bezdin and says that she was mizana as a naira marasa, it would still be skila by this case as well, by motzi shemra. Amle Rafuna Breda of Yeshua. But now Rafuna Breda of Yeshua says to Rava, Dilma ki chadis rachmana heichad lo ishtini gufa aval heichad de ishtini gufa lo chadis rachmana. Rafuna Breda of Yeshua, however, suggests that maybe this chiddush by Motzi Shemra is dafka when she's a naira the whole time. Maybe when we say that by Motzi Shemra, even though she got married now, and now that she's married, if she'd be mizana, it would be chenek. Nonetheless, the punishment is going to be skila by Motzi Shemra, that when he comes the next day and says that she was mizana erisin, it's going to be skila. Maybe that's because she's still a naira. Meaning in the case where she was engaged as a naira, she was mizana as a naira, she then got married as a naira, he then comes to Bezdin and says, look, she was mizana as a naira. That's where we say, even though right now if she'd be mizana it would be chenek, but because it's Motzi Shemra, it reverts to skila. But maybe in a case where she's now a bogeres, she's no longer a naira, she's now a bogeres, maybe it would be chenek. That's what Rafuna Breda of Yeshua wants to ask. El Omer of Nachman Bar Yitzchok, rather says of Nachman Bar Yitzchok, Ishtini v'lo Ishtini Tanoi. So actually, we stepped into a machlokas Tanoi, says of Nachman Bar Yitzchok. That it's actually machlokas Tanoim about, do we say that now that she's a bogeres, is the punishment going to be chenek, or is it still going to be skila? It's a machlokas Tanoim. The Tananis, we learn in the Mishnah, Chotu achlo nismanu. So there's a halacha that if a fellow is, let's say, Mechal Shabbos by accident, a fellow does something that he has to bring a korban chatas for, so he brings a korban chatas, I believe it could be either a sheep or a goat. Now, if the kohen gadol or a nasi sins, well, they have a special korban, a nasi dafka brings a goat, and a kohen gadol dafka brings a cow. Okay? So, if they sinned prior to getting their fancy promotion to being Nasi or Kohen Gadol, the king or the Kohen Gadol, Vinismanu, and now they got their promotions. Hare hein ke'adiotis. So the Tanakama says that we treat them like adiotis, i.e., even though they change status, they retain their original punishment, their original, in this case, korban. Right? So they sinned prior to getting the promotion. So says the Tanakama, they bring the korban that they would have brought prior to their promotion. I.e., in our case, even though she's a bogeres, she would still get skila. Reb Shimon Omer, whereas Reb Shimon says, well, if they knew already prior to their promotion that they had sinned, right? Because there's two parts here. There's the sin and there's the knowing that you sinned. So if they already knew that they sinned prior to their promotion, chayovim, then they bring korbanis, the same korban that they would have brought prior to their promotion. Mishinismanu p'turim. But if they found out about the sin after their promotion, so then they're p'turim. And we want to say that that Reb Shimon is saying that when they have this change of status, that they're now the king or they're now the kohen gadol, so then there's also a change of korban. They no longer bring the korban that they would have brought prior to their promotion, and therefore, in our case, we would say that, like the opinion that now that once that she becomes a bogeres, the punishment would now be chenek. But one second, I'll say that Reb Shimon, his opinion is not that once they have the promotion, then we go based on the status of, based on their new status post promotion. I'll say that he sort of takes into account both statuses prior to the promotion and after the promotion, and in the end he says, you just don't bring anything. Right? We don't see that we go solely based on the new position, because if we did, then Lesi Korban Kidehashta. Then he should not be potter from bringing a Korban, but he should just bring the Korban that either a Nasi or a Kohen Gadol brings. Mashuach Par, that the Kohen Gadol would bring a cow, V'Nasi Soyer, and the king would bring a goat. But Reb Shimon is not saying that. He's saying he's completely potter. So I don't necessarily, so it's unclear to say, we want to say that the Tanakama says that we go based on the original punishment, or korban in this case, and Reb Shimon, we want to say Reb Shimon says you go based on the new status, but it's unclear, because even according to Reb Shimon, we're not saying go based on the new status, because if he said go based on the new status, it should be either a cow or a goat, but he says bring nothing at all. So it's hard to say that this machlokas aligns with our machlokas about does she get the bogeres punishment of chenek or the naira punishment of skila. We can't necessarily say that. So Ha'omar le Reb Yochanan, so says Reb Yochanan, says the Gemara really to answer this kasha, right? The kasha was, now that she's a bogeres, is it like the first brisa that it's chenek, or is it like or is it like the second brisa that it's skila? So Ha'omar le Reb Yochanan Latana, one second. Reb Yochanan said to the teacher of brises, who said the original brisa from Shila, that right, the brisa from Shila said that now that she's a bogeres, it's chenek. So Reb Yochanan had said to the teacher of that brisa, Tni tidon beskila. Reb Yochanan had said to him, actually, one second, now that she's a bogeres, the punishment is not chenek, it's actually skila. So in that case, then both brises are actually agreeing that even though she's a bogeres, she still gets skila. Ve'amai, how come? Naira morosam rachmana v'abogeresi. The pasuk says naira hamorasa. At this point, she's a bogeres. Why should she get skila? So Amar Reb Ila, Amar Kra, says Reb Ila that the pasuk says ha naira, the naira, ha naira shahisa kvar, meaning even the naira that was, even if she's no longer a naira, but she was a naira, so she still gets skila. Amar Reb Chanani to Reb Ila, says Reb Chanani to Reb Ila, Yachi milka nami lilka me'asela nami lishalim. So if we're saying that even once she's a bogeres, she's still going to get skila because it says ha naira, right? She was a naira at the time. Well, then if that's the case, then if she's getting skila, then he should get whipped, and he should have to pay 100 selas if he's lying. So Amalei Rachmana Nitzlun Me'ai Daita. So Rabbi Ila says to Rabbi Hananya, may God save us from your opinion. Adab Rachmana Nitzlun Me'ai Daita Didach. To which Gemara says, no, God should save us from your opinion. The time of my, how come we say that the husband does not get whipped and does not have to pay 100 selas if he turns out to be a liar? Well, let's think, what did everybody do wrong? What she did wrong, if she's guilty, is that she was mizanes and naira morosa. What he did wrong was that when she was once she was a bogeres, he lied. Right? So if she's guilty, it's because she was mizanes and naira morosa. If he's guilty, it's because he lied. He used his mouth, he used his words, and he lied when she's now a bogeres. Zo ma'aseh garmilok shizanoi naira zanoi. Well, what she would be guilty of is being mizana when she's a naira morosa, and the punishment for that is skila. V'zeh kimasvasav garmulo. And this fellow, when he lied, emas komichayev hayishaita vayishaita bogeres avoy. So when did he lie? When did he do what he did wrong? when he lied. And when he lied, she was already a bogeres, and a bogeres is not chayiv skila, is not shaykh to nari morasa, and therefore it's no longer motzi shemra, and he's not going to be chayiv makis, and he's not going to have to pay 100 selas. Friends, I think I might make my meeting on time. That's very good. It's very nice. Lamaise. Taner Rabbanon, the rabbis taught nari morasa shezinsa. Well, let me think about something for a second. What time is it? What do you want me to tell you? Nah. Okay. Let's go weiter. Turn about a nari morasa shizin. So you have a nari morasa who's mizana. A nari morasa mizana. Bad news, friends. Soklin osa al pesach beisavia. We stone her at the door to her father's house. Yikes. Dude, chaval. Ein la pesach beisav. Now, if there is no entrance to the father's house, soklin osa al pesach shara ir, so then we stone her at the entrance to the city, hahi, of that city. Now, if the majority of the city is idolaters, soklin osa al pesach bezdin, so then we stone her by the entrance to bezdin. Okie dokie. Kayutze b'davar ata omer. And similarly, we say that a fellow who worships the getchkis, soklin oso al shar she'avad bo, so we stone him by the gate where he worshipped. But if the majority of the city is idolaters, soklin oso al pesach bezdin, so we stone him at the entrance to bezdin. How do we know this? The Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught shayrecha zeshar she'avad bo. That when it says, what does the pasuk say? So it says that when we stone the getchke idolater, getchke worshipping, bowing down urs, so it says shayrecha. It says your gates. That means the gate that they worshipped at. Ata omer shar she'avad bo enu ela shar shenidon bo. Wait, how do I know that it's the gate that he worshipped at? Maybe it's the gate of the city in which he was judged. Nemar shayrecha lamata v'nema shayrecha lamalo. Well, it says shayrecha over here, and also says shayrecha where it says where that he worshipped the getchke. Ma shayrecha omer lamala shar she'avad bo. Just like the worshipping the getchke is obviously talking about the gate where he worshipped it. So also when it says shayrecha by the stoning of the individual, it means the gate where he worshipped the getchker. Alternatively, or additionally, I think really, of the kochavim, your gates and not the gates of the idolaters. And therefore, if it's a place that's majority of idolaters, then you do it by the entrance to Bezdin. Okay, fine. Now, okay, fine. Hi sharecha, hi ha'afikte. So now says the Gemara, but one second, sharecha, we already learned out to say that it's the gate of the city where he worshipped, not where he was judged. And yet over here we're learning it out to mean that davka, your gates, and not a gate of a place that's mostly idolaters. Imkin name across sha'ar. My sharecha shmamina taite. Well, Pasuk could have just said sha'ar, but it says sha'arecha, so we learn out both things. That's the gate where he worshipped, as well as the and as well as your gates, not the gates of mostly of the Kochavim people. Fine, so we know that by Avodah Zarah, so if it's a place that's mostly idolaters, so then we would stone the fellow by the gates of Bezdin. How do we know that the same applies to Nari Morasa? Amar Babo says Gomer Pesach, that it says Pesach by that you stone her by the Pesach of her house, of her father's house. Pesach, Pesach mi Pesach. So it says Pesach by your father's house. It also says Pesach by the Ohel Moed. Ufesach mishar, it says by the Ohel Moed Pesach Sha'ar Chatzer. So Pesach and Sha'ar are compared. V'Sha'ar misharecha, and it says Sha'arecha by Avodah Zarah. So somehow we create this link, this chain, to basically learn that also by Nari Morasa, if the place is mostly idolaters, so then you stone her by the entrance of Bezdin. Taner Rabbanan, I was taught Hamotzi Shemra. So a fellow who lies about his wife having being mizana after Erisin as a naira. So so he gets whipped, v'nosi me'asela, and he also has to pay 100 selas. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lilkos lokum mikomakum. So Rabbi Yehuda says, yeah, he gets whipped, but me'asela ba'al nosin lo ba'al eno nosin. But the 100 selas only if they had bia, right? Meaning only if the husband and wife had bia. But if he hasn't yet had bia with her, so then if he comes and he says, look, she was mizana after Erisin, so then he doesn't have to pay the 100 selas. Fine. Eliezer ben Yaakov Rabbanon, and the machlokas between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Yehuda is the machlokas between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So now, one second. The machlokas between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is that the rabbis say that whether he was Boel or not, so then there's still the Motzi Shemra, whereas Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says Dafka you have to be Boel. So now, Vachi Kamar, this is what's going on in our brisa. Hamotzi Shemra lo kevenosa me'asela ben shelo Baal k'Rabbanon. That a fellow who's Motzi Shemra, so he gets whipped and he has to pay 100 sela whether they had bia, right? Whether he and his wife had bia or whether they didn't, like the rabbis. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, look, lilkos loke mikomakum. Rabbi Yehuda says that either way he's going to get malchus, and as Rashi says, because that's for a different thing, right? So it's because of lo selech rachel ba'amecha, right? It's a different law that he violated. He was, saying lashon hara. He gets malchus for that. Me'asela ba'al nosin lo ba'al enu nosin Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Whereas the 100 selas, it's like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that dafka if he was Boel, so then he has to pay the 100 selas. But if they didn't have bias, then he doesn't pay the 100 selas. To those who say Kula Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that actually both the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda are like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that dafka he has to be Boel in order to be chayv. Where am I? Kula Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. This is what we're saying. Hamotzi Shema. Loke v'nosein me'asela v'ushabal. The Tanakama says that by Motzi Shemra he gets whipped and he has to pay 100 selas, but that's dafka that they had bia. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lilkos loke mikomakum. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, look, when it comes to malchus, it's regardless of if they had bia or not. But when it comes to paying the 100 selas, dafka if they had bia, then he has to pay the 100 selas. But if they didn't have bia, then he doesn't. For Rabbi Yehuda, lilkos loke mikomakum. Wait, does Rabbi Yehuda really say that regardless of if they had bia, he would get malchus? V'atanu, we're learning the brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ba'al loke lo ba'al enu loke. Rabbi Yehuda says dafka if he had bia. If they had bia, then he would get malchus. If they didn't have bia, then he wouldn't get malchus. Oh, so when the brisa says, Rabbi Eliezer says that he would not, that he would only get malchus if he had bia. So then how do we understand when Rabbi Yehuda says that he gets malchus no matter what, whether they had bia or not? It means makas mardus, makas midorabanan. So midoraisa would have to have bia, but if they didn't have bia, so then they would get malchus midorabanan. Papa Omer, my baal loke dekatani also mamun. So Papa explains Rabbi Yehuda is actually saying that when it says baal loke, that if they had bia, then he gets malchus. So it doesn't mean that he actually gets malchus. It means that he has to pay the 100 selas. Malchus over here doesn't mean whips. It means money. The moment malchus, what we call money whipping. Since when? We actually do. We learn in the brisa. A person says, I'm going to pay to the Beis HaMikdash half of my erech, right? An erech is a fixed value per person. He says, I'm going to pay half of my erech to the Beis HaMikdash. No saying chatzi erko. The Tanakama says, okay, so he pays half of his value. If his value is 50 shekels, he pays 25 shekels. His erech. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda loke v'nosein erech shalim. So Rabbi Yehuda says he's loke and he pays the entire erech. So, loke amai, why should he get malchus? Amar papa loke be'erech shalim. No, it means that he gets hit with paying full erech. Meaning it doesn't mean that he literally gets hit. It means that he has to pay in full, not the half that he pledged. My time, how come he has to pay in full? K'serech chatzi erko otu erech chetzio. Well, because there's two ways that he could say it, which mean very different things. One is that half of my erech, so if his erech is 50 shekels, so half of that is 25. But the other way to say it is erech, what does it say? Erech chetzio. That he's only giving the value, not half his value, but only the value of half of himself. But the thing is, but the value of half of himself is basically the equivalent of saying I'm giving you the value of my brain, right? A vital organ. So if you say that I'm giving the erech of like my brain, well, you can't live without your brain, so it's basically like the erech of your entire body. You have to give the erech of your entire body. So therefore, we say that even if it says that he's going to give half of his erech, which would be acceptable, but we're concerned that, in a situation where he says, I'm going to give the erech of half of me, which you can't really live with just half of you, so then you would actually have to pay full erech. So we say, look, whether you say half of your erech or erech of half of you, either way you're going to have to pay in full. Friends, that was daf mem hey of Masechta Ksubis. Just quickly, at the beginning of the daf, we discussed three kind of situations when it comes to the punishment of Nari Marasa Shazinsa. One is that she was Mizana when she was a Nari Marasa, but then she got married. That's the situation of Motzi Shema, and if it's true, then we stone her at the entrance to her father's house. If she was Mizana as a Nari Marasa and she didn't yet get married, and witnesses come and said, look, you're Nari Marasa, you were Mizana, so then she gets stoned by the entrance to the city. And then we said that if she was Mizana as a Nari Marasa, and now she's a Bogeres, so that was where things got interesting. The first way to understand it is to say that, the punishment would be chenek, but then we had a different price that says that by Motzi Shemra, the punishment by Bogeres would be skila. Rava wanted to say, look, it's apples and oranges. That by Motzi Shemra, it's skila, but if she's still engaged, it would be chenek now that she is a Bogeres. In the end, we saw Rabbi Yochanan had said that actually, both prices are saying that it's going to be skila, right? I guess it was a mistake to say that, right? That it was going to be chenek now that she is a Bogeres. Alright friends, I'm going to stop here because I got to run and get ready for a meeting. Peace out.